Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of the accounting flow, accounting automation, where we transfer information from Airtable into Buku. So in this case, I've already updated the Airtable. So I've created an interface where we can just click Update Buku and press Yes Continue, where it will then pass information into Airtable through this workflow, right? I've already deactivated the original workflow for the staging server, where I'll just continue on from the previous video where I've stopped after we get the exchange rate calculation. So for this, we'll be using a different method already. So we'll just head on straight to checking whether or not the person exists or not, right? So this was the previous workflow chart that we've used, right? So firstly, we need to have the trigger, then create the trigger. Then we need to check whether or not if the customer or the invoice exists. Then only we start creating the payments, right? Create the invoice or customer or the payments. So right now, I'm just going to teach you how we can set up the integrations inside Buku and by using the API documentation where we can then check whether or not the invoice exists or not. So firstly, we need to head over to HTTP request, create a HTTP request. And in this case, we'll be using the integrations, right? Sorry, just expand this, right? So we'll head over to control panel, HTTP request, right? We head over to control panel and go to integrations, right? Just smaller so it's easier to show, right? Okay, so firstly we'll need to get the URL, right? So the first step, right, as I mentioned, was to check whether or not the customer exists. You can also make it so that you check if the invoice exists, depending on the accounting system that you use, right? In Buku's case, checking whether or not if the invoice exists was the more the easier method that we used, right? Whether or not if the person has an existing invoice, then we'll then branch out, as you can see here. We then branch out whether or not if it's an existing contact or if it's a completely new contact, right? So firstly, we need to head over to integrations, scroll down all the way in the introduction, and we need to add an authorization in the header, right? In the header. So we need to send a header, authorization, right? And for the value, we need to put, it's a bearer format. So we need to put bearer space, hit back to integrations and copy this access token, right? Copy all of it, right? And then just paste. After that, we need to add on this company subdomain, right? Just add another parameter and put the value will be here, Sigma Labs. And depending on your case, it will be your company subdomain and then .buku.fyi, right? So you'll be taking the thing before buku.fyi or buku.my, right? So add another parameter because in the API documentation, you're advised to add an accept header with the value application/JSON, right? Application/JSON, right? So we just, before we execute, we'll need the URL, right? You can already put this one, but it wouldn't do anything, right? Instead, you want to get the actual. See, you just make sure that it's a working. You can only know that it's a working connection, right? If you want it to actually check whether or not the invoice exists, you need to head over to sales, right? The API documentation. Under, you'll be here, right? You need to go over to invoice, read invoice list, right? And you need to copy this staging server's URL. Right? Copy it, paste it here, and you should get the whole list of invoice that's already inside this this Buku account, right? This Buku account, there are already existing invoices here, right? There are 1, 2, 3, 4. There's one more here. It's probably voided, but yeah, you get to see all of these invoices already inside. Right? 1, invoice 5, right? John Smith test, right? You can see all of them here already. So you will want to search whether or not the person exists. The way you can search for this person, the actual person from the webhook data, is by putting a question mark, search equals this person's name, right? So in this case, Ahmad Ismailin test is not here yet. There's no invoice for him, right? So even if I do put it here, it would be empty, right? Do put his name in here, right? So basically we are searching the invoice for Ahmad Ismailin test, but in this case we will not be getting anything because he is not in here, right? So let me just try for John Smith test, right? Particularly for John Smith test. John Smith test, right? And it should work because he's here, right? And you get his invoice only. You get his invoice data as well, invoice number, his contact name, right? As well as the balance for the invoice, which would that we can then use it for the existing contacts as above, right? But in this case, I'll just be showing the bottom path lah, right? So next, after we do check this the invoice, we'll need to just rename it lah for better check invoice list, right? For better documentation, so that someone else who looks at this workflow can understand what exactly is happening, right? So next step, we just copy this and just duplicate this, right? Duplicate this invoice, this HTTP request. We then need to check if the contact is available, right? As you can see the flow chart here, check invoice exists. Then we also need to check if the customer exists, right? So head over to the Buku documentation under contacts. You see contacts and need to read the contact list. So similar as before, copy this, hit over here, and change the URL to this one, right? And if you run this right now, you'll see everyone, right? You see all of them, right? All of these contacts, which is over here. Under contacts, you can see all of these people here, right? So in this case, if you want to check just for John Smith test alone, right? Similar to before, let me just expand this, right? Similar to before, you put a question mark, search equals John Smith test, right? And you execute it, you can only see one result, only one, no one else. Before it was like this. Before this, you see so many other people, right? Danny test, you see Dan test, right? So this step would be contact, right? We are checking for the contact, if the contact exists or not, right? So it will tell us the receivable amount, right? Receivable amount, as well as the payable amount. Right? In this case, it's null because it's just a test result. So check contact list. Right. So we can have an optional one, which is to check the account for later. But in this case, I won't be using this. Actually, you know what? I'll just create this because it's easier for us to refer to the account list later on, right? Accounts that exist here. So in this case, hit over, same thing as well, hit over to accounting, right? Accounts, I would say read account list, right? So you can see what type of accounts are there. Same thing, just copy paste and replace the URL. Oh shit, let me just duplicate this instead, so I don't need to create another header. You can also create a so say a generic credential type or a predefined credential type, so that's easier for you to create when you are doing all these connections. So the reason why I created this read account list is so that I can see where should this transaction be under current assets, or should this transaction be under Stripe, should this transaction be under Senang Pay, etc. for later, right? Because we'll need this ID, we need to drag and drop this ID for the next stages. Yep. So let me just read account list, read account list. So this is the next step where we need to see whether or not the contact exists in this place, right? So in this case, we are using it on John Smith, right? So let's see, let's create an if, right? It's an if, right? Where this value, so we have this if node where we check if the email exists inside Buku, right? We need to check whether or not the email exists, right? Two person can have the same name. For example, Danny Test and Danny Test 2, right? They can have the same exact name, but the email would be specific, right? So we will need to use the person's email as a filter, right? So in this case, we need to go back to webhook 1, which is the webhook data, and look for the person's email, right? So if person's email exists, right, or is the same, or in this case, I'm just going to put if it exists, right? If the person's email exists, it will go on the true branch or the false branch, right? Yeah, in this case, it doesn't exist, right? In this case, the person's email doesn't exist. Oh, sorry. We're not going to be taking from the webhook data. We're going to get from the contact list instead, right? So if this person's email exists in the contact list, right, then we'll then go up to the true branch. If not, it'll be the false branch, right? So in this case, the person's contact, Johnny Test in this case, exists, right? Because it exists. But in a real case scenario, because we'll be using this person, right? We'll be using the webhook data, right, instead of the person's data. So we'll be searching for the person's email. Right, just delete this. Sorry, what the person's name? My God. So we do search for the person's name here, right? Person's name. We are able to then see whether or not if he exists here, right? So in this case, the Ahmad Ishmaelin does not exist, right? He does not exist. That's why there's nothing here. So if the contact does not exist, right? In this case, it doesn't exist. You'll go down to the false branch where we'll then create a new contact. Right? So right now, for just now, it was just I just put in some dummy data so that we can see the flow of how things were going. So in this case, let me just replace this invoice list as well with the person's name, the webhook data as well. So now I've already included this already. Let me just quickly run it through. And we can see that, yeah, we do not get any results from there, right, from their name and their email. So then now pass to the bottom field where we then create a new contact, right? So in this case, because the data on Ahmad Ishmaelin is like this, and sometimes we do get clients from other countries where we need to have a standardized country code and number. So that's why we included this AI agent to sort of say standardize the number before we put it into this to create the contact. So yeah, in any case, this can be avoided if you just have a form for them to fill up, which strictly wants them to insert the country code in the correct format, right? But we did not implement that, but I think it'll be better if we do implement that. So please do implement that. So right now we just straight away move on to create contact, because this one is quite a long prompt, and I don't think it's the best practice. So we'll be changing that in the future as well. So instead, we just head on to create another HTTP request, right? So just duplicate this, and we'll head on to create a new contact inside of Buku, right? So under Buku API documentation, we need to go to contacts, and create contact. So we'll be using all these all these keys to create a contact, right? It may be a bit daunting to know what to do, right? What do you have to do after this, right? When you look at all of these fields that you need, which you do not really understand. But firstly, the first step to looking at all this is you can see what is required, right? Legal name is required, entity type is required, right? Just keep scrolling and you can see types is required, right? Customer, supplier, employee. In my case, it's standardized as a customer, because we will be only using this workflow for new customers, right? New clients, new customers, etc. So we are just going to be putting these few fields that we need to. Alternatively, if you're a bit lazy to go through all this, you can just copy all this, paste it into ChatGPT, and ask ChatGPT what is the field that you need to create a new account, right? So in this case, we need to change this to post, right? So just click that over here, change to post, copy the staging server, right? And we will need to set all of this data, set all of these inside the body, right? You can also refer to this, how they do the naming, etc., right? You can easily just copy paste this whole thing and then delete one by one which is the things that you don't have and which are the things that you do have, right? So in this case, just send body JSON using JSON, and you can paste this whole thing in, right? And paste this whole thing in, and it should work already. But yeah, let me just try to do it with based on the existing method. So after you've copy pasted all this, you can just easily delete what you want and what you don't want. In my case, I'm just gonna hit over here and take what I've created before this lah, right? So before this, I had a earlier node that tells us whether or not it's a Malaysian individual or if it's a foreign individual. But in this case, because it can get quite complicated, because depending on how you set who SST should be applied to, right? In this case, I'm just gonna use this existing, but I'm gonna fix this this entity type value, right? In this case, right here, it's an expression. Sorry, yeah. So in this case, I'm just gonna fix this entity type to Malaysian individual as requested by the API documentation. Right? So just copy paste this. Malaysian individual, right? And for legal name, it will be webhook, based on the webhook, right? Webhook 1. Sorry. Full name. Because we changed some of the naming of the fields already. Type will be customer, as you can see over here. Required is type, right? Legal name is required. Entity name is also required, right? Email, we actually don't really need email, but in this case, because our filters, we are using email to filter whether or not the person exists in Buku, so we'll be adding the email too, right? And yes, you can see here, right? You can put it as email. Currency, phone number, so just like before, just drag and drop. Or you can standardize it. If you standardize with the country code, it will be 60 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 6 9 8 5. Right. I'm just gonna follow it based on this one. So you will need to have a form that standardizes this kind of format instead of breaking it up to like this, right? So that would be the best. If not, you can always use a AI agent to fix the output as 6016, or depending on the country code, right? If it's 49 something 673 something, right? In my case, I'm just going, because this is just a demo, I'm just gonna fix it as have a fixed number, right? So default currency code would be under currency code inside the webhook, right? I have a currency code right here. Yep. MYR. Delete the old one. Address would be under where is it? Yeah, it's the country is where I took it. Right. City, right? So if you just execute it, it should create a new contact, right? As you can see, it successfully created it. So you can head over to Buku, click on contacts, right? You can see that Ahmad Ismailin has been created, right? You can see his legal name, right? As you name here, the legal name. He's a customer. He's a Malaysian individual instead of a foreign individual. He's a Malaysian individual. He's a customer. And you can also set all of these reservable accounts. So all of his future transactions, where would it go, right? Etc. Yep, just like that. And this is the address, right? City, and the address, right? Which is here, Kuala Lumpur. Right, city, Kuala Lumpur. And we also included his phone number, right? With the country code. And also his email address. Just like that, we can create the account, right? Create account. Create account. Create contact, sorry. Yeah. So next, we'll need to create an invoice, then create a payment. So similar like before, you need to head over to the API documentation, head over to sales, head over to invoice, and see create invoice, and see what is needed to create an invoice, right? Contact ID, right? These are things that are already here, right? Contact ID is here already. When you create a contact, you have the contact ID. You will need the date as well, currency code, right? In this case, if you we already have the currency code as well, so we can just drag and drop it from later. Where is it? Yeah, default currency code. You can already drag and drop it. Exchange rate is also required, which is why we had this note where we calculate the exchange rate, right? Which is 1. In this case, because this person, Ahmad Ishmaelin, is a MYR, it's Malaysian, so it's going to be 1. Or you can just standardize as 1 lah. But if you have international clients, you will need to have this step, right? You need to have this step to calculate the exchange rate. So you have a tax mode as well to say if it's inclusive or exclusive of tax. And yeah, the form items, which is the form items would be this and the invoice, right? The form items would be its items, right? All of these items, right? If you included more items, this would be a form item inside the invoice, inside here, when you're using API documentation. Service date as well as this status as well. I'm just going to put it as ready, right? Because it'll all be ready when we set it. So yeah, similar to before, we will need to create this invoice body actually, but in my case, I'm just going to, because I've actually created the invoice body here, invoice items, based on what they have enrolled, right? And it can get quite complex as to what this logic is, because depending on what they sign up for, right? Let's say they did sign up for, they sign up for MBG as a study hub and signs to have 2 years of pro membership, they would have a different amount that goes into the invoice. So instead of using this way that is particular to our way of using this invoice system, I'm just going to create a standard invoice system so that you understand how to create the invoice, right? So firstly, you need to understand what you need, right? For example, form items, what is the ID for form items? What's the tax mode, right? What's the account ID? All of these, you will need to know when these tax code IDs as well. You can always head over to this, right? You can create a new HTTP request as well. I'm just going to duplicate this, right? Copy this link, this URL right here, and depending on what you want, right? So for example, I would want to know about the account list, right? What are the account lists that I have? What are the accounts that I have here, right? Copy this and put it into body, right? Change it to using JSON. Sorry, post. Get to see all of these accounts, right? Like it's the same thing as this read account list, but in this case, it's the proper way of how you can send this into Buku itself, right? So I'm just gonna keep this so that I can use it later, right? Lists. Right, so now we need to create an invoice, right? So create invoice would be, you need to head over to sales again, we duplicate this, create invoice, copy this, staging server, and then copy paste it, right? So now, just like the creating contact, you need to go through to see which one is required, right? So you can just copy this, just paste it all in here. Paste it all in here, and now you just slowly edit what you need, what you don't need, right? So for payment mode, I don't really need this. Let's try to delete this. Contact ID, what's the contact ID? 70, so we just drag and drop it here. Invoice number, we do not have that, and we don't really need it, right? It's a required field, so we can just delete this. For date, you need a date, right? Okay. For date, there's a specific way to put it as today, right? Let let's see. It's over here, I think. Date. Where is it? Maybe today lah, but wait. Yeah. This one. Now format. This. Right, so you need to include these brackets. Right? It's curly brackets. Now.format YYY-MM-DD. Right, so you get the year, month, and date. Currency code. Let's just drag and drop it as before. Under. You can just drag and drop from the webhook as well if you need to. Right. So let's go on to where is it? There we go. Exchange rate, where we can go to this one where we calculated the exchange rate from before. So it will be dynamic depending on who is it, right? So now we go back to here. Billing party we don't need. Show shipping we don't need this. Okay, delete. Shipping party all the way to remarks. We can delete all of it. All the way to remarks. Delete all this. Tax mode, right? So as I mentioned earlier, we have a place where we automatically calculate. We have a formula on how we decide whether or not the tax should be applied to them, right? Depending on where they're from and also which account that they're using to pay from. So it can get really, really complicated. So in this case, I'm just going to standardize it as exclusive, right? I'll just rename this real quick. Create invoice. Right. Tax mode is required. Form items is required. So we just need to open it up and see what is needed here, right? So pop here. So for form items, we don't need the ID, we don't need the transfer and ID, don't need the type as well, I think. And just delete this. Account ID, so we don't need it actually. Hey, actually we do need it to say it is from, let's see. We do need the account ID because number 20 is, let's see, number 20 is, yeah, that's the downside of this. I need to find what ID number 20 is, right? So which is why this comes in handy. If not, I need to always run this to see what account number 20 is, right? Account 20 is sales income, right? So which is correct because we need this account 20, which we can always drag and drop from before, right? Over to account 20. So account 20 is this one. So I'm going to drag and drop this as well. Delete this. So description, we can always use the data from the webhook, right, for our course, right, so that we can know what is this payment for. In this case, will be this course enrolled. Right, the rest can delete. And the service date, if not mistaken, service date I can leave it. I don't need it, right? Service date, yeah, I don't really need it. I can just delete this. Product ID, all the way. Actually, I don't really need it anymore. And to know what tax code it is, right, you can also see it through here, right, this list, which is why this list comes into handy, right? Head over to list and tax codes, right? Copy this and replace this body, right? Replace this body. You can see what are the tax codes. What do each tax codes mean, right? Religion tax, SST tax, which is a 10% tax, or in my case, I usually use SV8, which is 8% tax, right? So I have to put the tax code, which is this ID, right? So here, open it back. Tax code will be 22, right? Classification code, I don't need that as well. Let me just delete all of this, I think. Yeah, I can just delete all of it. Term items, right? Let's see if we do need term items. Yeah, it's a lot of playing around with the API documentation. A lot of this setting up. So it may not be the most friendly project for a non-technical person. But I did it, so I think it's something you can do it as well. Okay, so all the way to status, you don't need all this. Yeah, oh shit. Yeah, I think it should be a close bracket here as well. Close bracket. And a close bracket. Right. Status ready. Yeah, you don't need all of this. Everything else, you don't really need it. So and yeah, it should run, right? Moment of truth. Okay, it needs to be a valid JSON. Let's see. Right, so I did not include the form items correctly. Right, so for unit price, I'll need to, same as before, pull from the webhook data, right? So in this case, it is the total payment, which is amount, right? Amount 1,000. Quantity will be 1, and I also need to put in this comma. And yeah, I think that should be it. Let's try. Let's go. All right, it finally worked, right? This is why sometimes it's easier to actually just copy all this and throw it into AI and ask it tell it what data you already have in hand, right? So it's easier for it to create all of this at once. But yeah, I'm just showing you how you can do it step by step. Yeah. So just like that, you're able to create an invoice, right? So if you go over to, need to save, head over to invoice, and see we've created this invoice here already. Right? And since tax is included, right? 8% tax, which is why the amount is now 5,400, right? So yeah, now we need to move on to the next step, which is to create a payment based on this existing invoice, right? So now there are a few methods, right? One method is to check if the contact is there, if the invoice is there, right? I like to do it so that we check the actual invoice is there, right? So we need to read the invoice, read the actual invoice. So we just copy the staging service API, staging service URL for the checking invoice, right? So we just replace this URL, and we need to find this transaction ID, right? Check actual invoice, right? So the transaction ID will be this ID. Just drag and drop it as well. Delete this, and you do not need to send a body. You just need to execute it. Right? Oh, sorry. So get. Yeah, there we go. You can get all of the invoice data, right? If not, you can only get the list of invoice, right? Which is not as detailed as this invoice, right? I'll just set this up real quick and show you the difference between both of it. Right? If not, you can only just get the very it's not as detailed as you would need it to be, right? And you also might get the other invoices, right? It's not as detailed as a unique ID, right? Unique invoice ID, right? So let me just delete this real quick. Next, we need to head over to creating the payments, right? So to create payment, same thing as before, sales, under payment, the create payment, right? So let's create this one, create a duplicate. So this one would be post as well. Copy staging server, method will be post as well, paste it. And now we'll need to fill up these details, right? Same as before. You can copy this and paste it. Okay. The reason why I have had all of these code notes before creating a payment was so that I create this body itself. This body straight right off the bat from all these code notes before throwing it into Buku, right? So like I said, it can get really messy in here. So we've already spent around probably like 30-40 minutes on this video, and yeah, in reality it took a long time to actually perfect all of these code notes, right, where you calculate what is the actual payment received, right, and also apply the actual rate based on it, actual rate depending on whether or not SST is applied to that person, right? So just like before, we need to create payment, and enlarge this, right? Enlarge this, and we need to refer to what is a required thing, right? So for contact ID, same as before, we'll need to pull in from the create contact. You can also pull it from create invoice, but I like to pull it from here straight, right? Or you can even have another node here to check whether or not the contact exists, which is why I had this as well, right? So you just can easily just change this, duplicate, open it. So it's basically, I just took this from the previous one. So it's basically the same thing, searching for the contact, right? Searching for the contact, the URL, then question mark, search equals to the person's full name and the person's email, right? Same as before, just same as the one here, right? So instead of this one, now we're checking the actual created contact, right? Check contact, right? So now if we do run it, we are going to get, when we do run it, we're going to get an actual data now, instead of it just being empty, right? You can get how much money. Instead of before, over here, it was empty because the contact hasn't been created. So now we're just going to link it to create a payment, right? So we can always just drag and drop its ID, right? Check contacts ID, right? His ID, just show you contact here, right? Jason's contact ID. Sorry. Right, so similarly, just replace all this, delete the number. For date, you can also make sure it's the same, right? Make sure it's today, right? Same like the previous date formatting, right? So just go to create invoice, take the format, right? To now, $now dot format, right? R, same as before. I'm just going to pull it straight from the actual invoice so that it stays consistent. Right. Invoice. Exchange rate will be 1. And the amount will also be, let's see, the amount will be from webhook, right? Because the payment amount should be based on the first payment, right? Because the guy only paid $1,000 instead of 5,000, which was the total invoice amount. So next we need to link items, right? Depending on need to link to this transaction ID, which is why we needed this, right? So we need to link to this one. Boom. Right, let me just check it again under link items. Yeah, we link to the actual transaction ID. And then we need to put the amount. Where's the amount? Yeah, this one. So the description will be the same, right? So it will be this one as well. Or you can even set it, can even type, let's say, payment for self-paced bootcamp, right? For the remarks, you can create it based on your way, right? But in my case, I'm just going to put it as a customer name, customer email, right? So that I know who's the one actually paying based on the invoice that was received. Right. So head over to where is it? Oh, on the name. Dash email dash phone number dash payment method as well. Okay, I want to have a difference. I want it to be in a different line. So this is just basically enter. You're using a different line, right? So enter payment method. I want to know what's the payment method, which is CMPFPX. Space, as well as enter again the date of payment. Payment date is this one, 15 November. There we go, just like that. We're gonna get this in the remarks, right? Who paid, the email number, as well as the details, right? So for this tax IDs, if I'm not mistaken, we do not need all of this. Yeah. Deposit items. Let's see, what do we need here? So for deposit items, we'll need to see what are these actual IDs in your account, right? So similar to before, we'll need to read the lists, right? So I'm just drag here in case so I don't overwrite the data. So when you head over to lists, the payment methods, right? Which is payment methods is, if I'm not mistaken, for deposit items, right? I think it should be. Copy this. Okay. Yeah, for deposit items, we will need the payment method ID before we find the account ID and amount, etc. So which is why we need to read the list for payment methods, right? So payment methods mean like bank transfer or cash if they paid by credit card, online payment, etc., or payment gateway. So in this case, I'm just going to set it as payment gateway because most of the payments that we receive are in fact from payment gateways as well. So yeah, so payment gateway's ID is number 7. Number 7, right? In the previous one we are using, it's all very dynamic. So it's all automated with all the code nodes. So for this account ID as well, we're gonna use the contact that we've created, right? Just to understand where they're paying to. The account list that we've created. Sorry, we're gonna use the invoice that we've created. So for account ID, we'll be taking it from the invoice, right? So because we did assign an account ID for it, which is sales income, right? Which is sales income. So meaning all of this payment for this invoice is under sales income, right? So the amount that was paid is how much was actually paid. It will depend on the webhook amount, right? Which is 1,000. Here, first payment. This one, if I'm not mistaken, I can delete all the rest. Yeah. The account ID. Yeah, you can delete all the rest here. Should be okay. Status has to be ready before, and the rest can be deleted. Right. Last check, yeah. Cannot be more than the transactions amount. Right, so I've replaced this amount with 1,000 ringgit, which is from the first payment, apply amount as well, and also the total, the amount of these at the top, right? And yeah, just like that, it passed through and applied $1,000 to the total amount of the invoice, and the balance after applied is also shown. So if we head over to the payments, right, let me just refresh this. You can see that we've made 1,000 ringgit payment to that invoice, right? So you can see that this payment gateway, right, which was number 7, deposit item, payment ID number 7, account ID was 20, which was sales income, made a payment of 1,000 to this invoice, which was Ahmad Ishmaelin's invoice. And you can also see the remarks from before: purchase name, email, number, space, payment method, space, payment date. And this is the invoice. And you can see that we've made a payment of 1,000 ringgit and the balance of the invoice, just like that. Yep. And yeah, I would show you guys how to add the attachments, right, for the payment attachments. However, for Buku, their attachments for the staging account is not working as intended, so I'm not able to show you. So just like that, we've been able to create a payment all the way from a webhook all the way to creating a payment inside of Buku, right? And to test this out, you can also, let me just unpin this data. You can try to test this out, right? Let's see. Ready? Okay. To test this out, I can always just execute this workflow, right? I'm just gonna head over to this one. Which one was it? This one. Right. I'm gonna select a test data. Right. So I'm just gonna select a test data right here. Lauren test. Run automation. And let us see. Let me just head over here. Yep, Lauren test, just like that. We have the USD as well, which is why we needed this amount, right? So 3,000 USD, and the person paid 3,000 USD, right, for the total amount of 7,800. With a balance of 7,800, he paid 3,000 for the total invoice, which is 10,800 USD. Right, there we go. Yeah, just like that. It is working as intended. So for this one, it doesn't have a payment date because, let's say, it doesn't have a payment date included here. That's why. Yeah. Okay. Just like that, you're able to build up a simple accounting automation, right? A rather simple accounting automation, which allows you to create a payment, an invoice, a payment, and as well as a contact, all the way from a click of a button inside of Airtable, right? Yeah, for attaching proof of payments, right, this one is not able to be shown inside the staging server, and for the production server, which is the live server, we have existing customers with their actual personal data, so we do not want to show those. So perhaps when Buku does fix their staging server, we'll then create a video for it. Yeah. And just like that, that is all from me, right? If you want to see another video on how we actually create the logic for differentiating what to put inside the invoice, as well as to differentiate whether or not it's a existing contact or if they have already an open invoice where we create a new invoice, or we just straight away create a new payment for the customer, right? Do comment below and we can we'll create a video for you, right? Yeah, that's all from us, right? Thanks for watching, and happy automating. Thank you.